Alright, hey, it's a Narwhal review. One thing I've noticed about online reviews, especially with things that people really like, is they'll tend to get more criticism than something that they don't like. And I think the reason why that is because they like it, they want to think about it, they want to discuss it, and so that leads them to going over it with a fine-tooth comb, and so they'll end up criticizing it more just because they'll start to nitpick because they look at every little facet because they're so enraptured with the book or the movie or whatever that it ends up getting more criticism than if it's something that they didn't like, which they just dismiss and move on. So this is my first Narwhal book that I've read. I was too late in the game to get, what was the first one? Earthbound. I'm hoping I can pick it up when he comes out with the sequel. But Foreign Agent, that's my first Narwhal book. And yes, I did read it in one sitting, even though it's like 200 some pages. My second read through, I did it in 2 sittings. But bottom line, I like this book. It's got a great simple premise that really hooks you. There's 2 soldiers who end up taking over this house of this foreign land, and they don't speak the same language as the inhabitants of the house, and so there's this language barrier that creates this natural tension. And it's a great high concept, great elevator pitch, and there's a lot of stuff you can do with that, and Narwhal does it really well. The characters are all really well done, very natural and not overstated, but you get a full development of their characters. There's basically 5 main characters in this cabin that's trapped in the snow. There's, hopefully I get all these right, Harold, Alexandria, Thomas, August, and Piper. And I think they're all really good characters, except for maybe Harold. I'll get into that a little bit later. The pacing of the book is really good. It's very cinematic. There's a lot of silent panels, so even though it's like 200 some pages, it's a really quick read and you can go through it fairly quickly. And it gives you a full experience, and it feels very cinematic. And I can't quite put my finger on why it feels so cinematic, but it really does feel like a movie. Maybe somebody can enlighten me as what makes this book feel so cinematic, but it's a great experience, and honestly it's kind of unique in comparison to most of the comic books that you get nowadays. The art style is great, but it's very stylized. Narwhal has a really unique style, showing some of the early pages here. He's got a very even line. It feels kind of digital, but the perspective on the characters is really, really good. I think this is part of the reason it feels so cinematic, is everything kind of feels like it's through a camera lens instead of being a straight-on flat shot. Everything looks a little more dynamic just because of the subtle angles he puts on simple little pages, and I really like that. So I have criticisms of the book, which I'll get into now. I don't know if they're valid. Some of them might not be valid. I've heard before that criticism should be a critique of what's in the book and not what you wish was in the book. And so some of my criticisms may cross that line, but let's just get into it. some of the stuff in this book is a little vague. Like, everything's really understated, and I typically like very understated versus an overstated. You have to spell everything out. I think having it understated is better, but some of the things are so subtle that you're not 100% sure that you understood it correctly. For example, Alexandria, her whole situation is a little vague. We're going to get into spoilers now that I'm doing the criticisms. So, warning. I think she's a gypsy that's taken in by Harold in exchange for sex. But I'm not 100% certain. I think that's her story, though. Thomas, I think, is Harold's son. He's the little boy who draws, and I think he's the grumpy old man's son, but I'm not 100% certain on that either. One of the most confusing things, though, let me flip to this, is every chapter ends with a drawing plus a photo of a wedding, and I assume this is what's on a roll of film that they found, but I'm not 100% certain. It's a wedding by the looks of it. And they mention later on in the book that something went down at a wedding. Like, they murdered their commanding officer at a wedding. So are these pictures of that same wedding? Plus, August, who's our primary protagonist, one of the soldiers, has a wife back home. And I almost got the impression that these are pictures of his wedding, but I'm not 100% certain. I'm probably missing something obvious here, but that part was confusing for me. And getting back to, I'm not 100% certain that they murdered their commanding officer. I think they did. And I think they murdered him because he gassed a village, and then they're AWOL, running away, and they're going to go tell higher-ups or the media or the world that this happened, and that's why they're running away. But I'm not 100% certain on that either. Another part, probably the most confusing part for me, is later on in the book, Harold has to be subdued for a second time. And if you look here, let me see if I can get it. They inject him with a syringe. I don't know where this syringe came from. I don't know what's in this syringe. I assume they're giving him something to knock him out, but it just seems to come out of nowhere. Maybe I missed a hint earlier on in the story, but I looked for it the second time I read the book, and I still didn't understand that. And that comes back to the character that I really had a problem with, is Harold. He seems bipolar. Sometimes he wants to kill, like, everybody else in the cabin. And then other times, he's, like, making them pancakes. I don't know if he's supposed to be bipolar or if he's just kind of passive and then he gets riled up, or what it was exactly. So that comes to my biggest criticism. In the final act, Harold loses it and runs off. And he comes back with a snowmobile gang. And they're going to kill everybody. And this isn't really set up at all. Where did this snowmobile gang come from? It's kind of implied that Harold's a bad guy, like he may be a criminal. Why is he hanging around this cabin making pancakes for these soldiers if he's got like this armed snowmobile gang just waiting out there they can go call on to like take care of situations? It didn't really make sense to me. Big spoilers. Piper here, the more impetuous of the two soldiers, bites it in the end, and he's having flashbacks of August's wife. I don't know if he was having an affair with her or if he was just in love with her, or what it was exactly. Maybe all this is like intentionally vague, and it's meant to accent the fact that we have these two groups of characters who don't speak each other's language, and so they're confused and they don't have the whole picture, and so us as the readers don't have the whole picture either. Maybe that's it. All in all, it's a really good book that I liked a lot, and it made me think about it a lot, and that's a good sign that I liked it, because I thought about it, I read it twice, I'm for sure going to read it again, and that means it's compelling to me, and it's definitely worth a read. So I give it a thumbs up, and I really like the book. Thank you.